Chapter 24. Freedom from Exploitation. Many people explain their problems by describing themselves as exploited. Some feel they can never be free so long as the economic system exploits them. Others blame their poverty on businesses that sell them goods at exorbitant prices. On a personal level, some people attribute their job problems to exploitation by their employers or associates. Others complain about the continual mistreatment they receive from their friends, family, or lovers. Freedom from exploitation comes not from changing other people or the economic system. It comes from a recognition of the direct alternatives available to you. If you feel you're exploited, it's probably because you feel trapped in a situation in which there are no alternatives. But there are always alternatives. What is it? By definition, exploitation is usually considered to be the utilization of someone or something for purely selfish ends. But as we have seen again and again, all persons' motivations are purely selfish. You can't expect to deal with anyone who won't be acting in his own selfish interest, whatever it may be. So you will never be free from exploitation if you hope to arrange things so that others won't act in ways they think will bring them mental well-being. Each person will act upon the best alternatives he thinks is available to him. So when you think someone is exploiting, it's simply that he's doing what he thinks best. He may seem to be taking advantage of someone, but we also know that the other person, the exploited, is doing what he thinks is best. And so we come to the key question. If someone is being exploited, why does he permit it? Why does someone willingly put himself in a position where it appears to us that he is being taken advantage of? Let's look at some examples of exploitation in different kinds of relationships to see if we can get an answer. Personal relationships. I have often been bored by someone telling me over and over again how his spouse mistreats him, how his friends take advantage of him, how his boss abuses him, how his lover uses him. Why does he permit it? Why doesn't he terminate the relationship rather than allow the same person to exploit him over and over again? Obviously, the individual permits it because he believes it's the best alternative available to him. He might wish he had a better alternative, but he doesn't know of any, and so he stays where he is. It's surprising then that he usually aims his bitterness at the person he's dealing with, when he really wishes that someone else would offer something better. I think it's a general rule that if you feel you're being exploited, the person you're dealing with is usually the last person you should blame. In a sense, an individual can be made to suffer for his good qualities. For it's his good qualities, those that you value, that make him attractive to you. Otherwise, you would simply ignore him. But because he seems to offer you something, you want to be involved with him. And if there is something about him you don't like, you could be tempted to try to change him. But it won't work. Each person is what he is. To try to change him is to frustrate yourself with an indirect alternative. The resentment that many people call being exploited is usually the result of such frustration. Your only direct alternatives are to look for someone better, or to change the nature of the relationship so that his differences don't have to get in the way, as we saw in Chapter 18. If there are better alternatives available to you and you don't take advantage of them, then it's you who is abusing you. You don't have to be involved with cheaters, frauds, cheapskates, liars, demanding people, or anyone else you don't like. It is up to you to choose the people you will deal with. Friendships don't have to be excuses for continual demands. And love affairs don't have to include constant arguments or sacrifices. If your situation does, it is because you've chosen to permit it. You will free yourself from such exploitation only by enlarging your range of alternatives. What other way is there? Economic exploitation. I've often heard it said that the profit system allows businessmen to exploit workers. The working conditions during the Industrial Revolution are frequently cited as evidence. Men, women, and children were supposedly forced to work in terrible conditions for little pay. Again, the question to be asked is, why did they permit it? Why did they work in such terrible conditions? The only conceivable answer is that they wanted to. Individuals left their farms and other occupations and migrated to the factories because it was an improvement over what was available to them before. You probably wouldn't work 12 to 14 hours a day in a hot, stifling factory for $1. That is, you wouldn't do it in 1973, when this book was written. But millions of people did so willingly in the 19th century, because that was better than other opportunities. Should the businessman be blamed for improving the lot of the workers? The introduction of machinery made it possible to produce more in the same number of man-hours. Consequently, profits went up, wages went up, and prices dropped. People bought more because they could afford more at lower prices. And many competed for the factory jobs because the work offered an opportunity to improve their living standards. There isn't any other logical explanation. To think otherwise is to assume somehow that millions of people gave up good pay and good working conditions to debase themselves in factory work. Without the Industrial Revolution, most of us today would be working on farms, barely producing enough to feed ourselves, making our own clothes, living without things we now consider necessities, working 12 or more hours every day of the week. And without the profit system, the Industrial Revolution probably never would have happened. Men were inspired to create improvements in production because of the rewards they could get from them. The men who made millions of dollars from the innovations provided far more wealth to other people. Otherwise, those other people would not have paid them for what they did. No one pays money if he thinks he has a better alternative. It is ironic that the men who are pictured as symbols of greed and exploitation are the ones who have done the most for other people. It would seem that most people aren't happy with the things they take for granted. For example, if Henry Ford had been prevented from making his $1 billion, we might have been deprived of the availability of low-cost, mass-produced automobiles. If you don't think automobiles are a blessing, you don't have to buy one, of course. I fail to see how we have been exploited by people who have advanced our standards of living and become wealthy in the process. The general market determined how much their services were worth to people, and for every person who became wealthy, there were hundreds who tried but didn't offer what people wanted. If the people who gave money to the men who became wealthy had felt they were being exploited, they could have stopped it by not buying their products. Commercialism. A frequent complaint is that someone is charging too much for his services. But he can be charging too much only if someone else is willing to offer the same service for less. If no one else will offer the service for less, how can we say the price is too high? We hear of businessmen who exploit Negroes and others in the ghetto areas. It's said that they charge higher prices than are charged in other areas of the cities. If that is true, and there's no real need for the higher prices, it should be a marvelous opportunity for someone to go into these areas and outsell the exploiters by charging lower prices. Why don't those who are concerned about exploitation do that? They could offer a humanitarian service and make a good profit while doing it. There must be a reason that they don't. And when you find that reason, you will know that no one is exploiting anyone. There's no way anyone can get into a position where he can charge any price he wants to charge, for competition always exists, even if the competition isn't selling the same thing. A person who sells ballpoint pens has to compete with people who sell other ballpoint pens, pencils, fountain pens, typewriters, crayons, etc. If he charges more for his pens than they are worth to people, they will find other ways of satisfying their needs. If a water company decided to charge $25 for the amount of water necessary to water your lawn, would you buy it? Probably not. You would water your lawn less often. And if car prices are too high, you might buy a new car every 4 or 5 years instead of every 3. Individuals can always get by for short periods of time with minor inconveniences. But a lack of sales is a major inconvenience to a company. It has an investment to recoup, a payroll to meet. Most companies can't last very long on their reserves. They have to make sales. As a result, they charge the prices they think will bring them the greatest profit, which means a price that's low enough to keep competition away and low enough to make it profitable for people to buy their products. You don't have to buy from anyone. If you do buy, it's because you value the product or service more than you value the money you're spending. To resent a price is to wish that the seller would be kinder and charge less or give more in return. That's wishing that the other person were less selfish than you are. And while that would be nice if it were possible, it isn't possible. So why even think about it? No one has to produce for others. He will do so only when he believes it's to his advantage. And no one has to buy from anyone. He will do so only when it's to his advantage. The desire for the service, together with available alternatives, will determine the price. Since no one has to produce what I want, I'm relieved and grateful when I find that the things I want are available. I feel fortunate that others have chosen to produce the things I'd like to have. I feel lucky that there are operas to see. I certainly couldn't produce one all by myself. That there are so many different cars to choose from. That there are people who produce phonograph records, books, movies, and the other things I like. Sometimes I might wish they had done things differently, but how can I object to the fact they have produced the things I want? Alternatives. In the same way, the people I associate with on a personal level offer me more than the other alternatives I'm aware of. How can I complain? If I continue dealing with someone, I'd better accept him as he is. I'm grateful for every relationship I've had. Because I seek happiness, I'm on the lookout for better relationships and better ways to handle relationships. But if I find them, that doesn't detract from the value of what I've had in the past. You don't have to buy from anyone. You don't have to work at any particular job. You don't have to participate in any given relationship. You can choose. If you feel exploited, you have 4 alternatives available. 1. You can stay and complain that you're being used. 2. You can try and change the other person. 3. You can change the relationship so that the other person's drawbacks don't affect you. 4. You can withdraw from the relationship and look for better alternatives. Only the last 2 alternatives offer any hope for a better life. You just sap your strength when you become preoccupied with the drawbacks of the person you deal with. He will continue to be what he is. Let him be that. It doesn't have to affect you. You can have so much more if you recognize your own sovereignty. In the final analysis, the only person who can exploit you is you, because you make all the final decisions for your life. Freedom from exploitation is perhaps the easiest freedom to get. All you have to do is to stop participating in any relationship of any kind that doesn't suit you.